Welcome to Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation. This podcast was created for the boomer woman leaving corporate, and now you're looking to reinvent yourself, become an author, an entrepreneur, a podcaster. Well, each episode will leave you with clarity. You will come away with the yes, I can and yes, I will reinvent myself mindset. So come on, let's do this. I'm your host, Margot Levette. Had a conversation with this lady, and it is a grand lady indeed that we are about to have a conversation with. Her subject matter grabbed me. First of all, I never put grief, which is what we're going to speak about today. I never put grief with entrepreneurship. I never connected grief with how it affects us in the workplace. But when I read this lady's profile and how she connects everything, and we had this awesome conversation a couple days ago, I thought she has to come on to the show, and we have to have this conversation quick, fast, and in a hurry. So let me hurry up and bring her in. Monaye Marcia, she is helping women entrepreneurs with grief. She challenges organizations to reimagine effective grief programs. Don't just throw everybody together because grief is personal, and organizations have a way of just throwing everybody together as a form of working with people, and it just doesn't always work. Monaye is a certified life trauma coach who helps you grow from the trauma instead of letting it keep you stuck. So everybody, men and women, let me introduce you to Monaye Marcia. Monaye, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this fun and exciting subject, right?
Well, to me, it was a bit intimidating. And I thought, oh my God, how are we going to approach this so that it's not dead and dreary? But this is your wheelhouse, as they say. So, man, let's just get started. And I think you're going to kick it off with your definition of grief. Let's start right there.
Absolutely. And you know what? As we go into that, I love that you mentioned how this subject can be devastating to people. Sometimes it can throw them off. They don't really want it. They want to just scroll past it. But the true reality is we're only in these human earth suits, but for so long.
Yes.
And so we know coming in, we were born into this world and we're going to exit. But we're not just talking about grief as in life and death. We're talking about other areas. The way that I like to look at grief is literally dictionary definition. One is a deep and poignant distress, and the second is a cause of suffering. Okay, and that doesn't just happen in life and death situations. When I think about what entrepreneurs deal with and the ones that I've worked with, here are 4 simple areas that comes up over and over again in a place of grief that they probably didn't even place it in, and they just want to move past it. The first one being is financial grief. And I'll come back and I'll define them a little bit more, but I just want to let you know what the 4 ones are.
Okay.
The second one is like a client and business grief. Then you do have your regular death-related grief. And the last one is a personal grief. And all of those different areas affect entrepreneurs at different times of their journey.
Yes, yes.
And many times we're just told to just work on past them. Don't even identify that we're going through them. Hide behind some of these griefs as we're continuing to so-called propel our businesses. But if we can learn how to actually help ourselves during these grieving moments, the propelling of the business is going to see a greater return than to try to hide and push them away. Because guess what? Something else is going to happen in life again.
Yes.
It's life. It's supposed to.
Wow. That you say right out the gate, you have said a mouthful. We take on, some of us drink a little bit too much, or we immerse ourselves into the business, trying to run away from grief. Before you elaborate on those subjects that really, and I know all of us that have been in business for any amount of time can identify. Will you tell us, give us a little bit of your background? This is not a subject that we just fall into. What's your background? How did this become so relevant and you decide this is my life work? Give us your story.
Yeah, so well, yeah, that's an amazing life work, and I would definitely say that it wasn't one that I raised my hand and chose. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't go to school for psychology. I actually have my degree in human resources and management. So, yes, I love people, but it wasn't necessarily to talk to people about grief, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a couple years back, it kind of happened to me, as they say, but it was just life. My children's father was murdered.
Mm.
And through that process, I had already started doing this coaching thing where I was learning how to self coach myself in a different area of just being closer to my family, showing up 100% for my family, no longer looking for them to do something for me, but how could I just be their biggest cheerleaders, their best person I can be for my family? So I had already learned some tools in that
Mm-hmm.
area. Then when the murder happened, and then my children kind of wasn't doing so well in that area, I found myself confused on how could I help them beyond the therapy,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a huge believer that therapy is so important. I think
Yes.
that people need to actually explore that when they go through something. And it was the after the therapy sessions were over where now my child was actually functioning again,
Mm-hmm.
but she was still having a hard time of like using that trauma that happened in her life and still moving on and not choosing to hang out with certain people, and her grades were slipping, all of those things that can happen with trauma,
Yes.
all those neural pathways that can really affect and change your brain structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, what if I use what I've been learning on this coaching side with her?
Wow.
Now during this time, I had a business. I had businesses that I were building for people because I'm also a virtual assistant. So I have clients, and this murder thing happened, and it was so many things going on that I started to get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
A relationship that was supposed to work out didn't work out. I had invested in some stuff a year later that didn't really plan where I thought it was going to plan it to be.
Mm-hmm.
I went through a divorce, and
Mm.
it's something that I didn't plan on saying, but it happened.
Yeah.
So that was happening. So all of these life related traumas, I was grieving while at the same time trying to figure out life. And what I
Mm-hmm.
found was I was stuck in my business. I figured out how to help my daughter. I figured out how to help my child, but then my business was suffering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm.
And I was wondering, am I the only one that gets stuck when going through these different types of traumas and grief while an entrepreneur?
Mm-hmm.
And I reached out to a group of coaches that are also entrepreneurs, and I was like, were you guys, what happened? Because I knew some people had some things happen in their life. And I was like, how did you keep your business going? And the truth was 95% of them, although we have this amazing coaching space where we're coaches, right? This is what we
Yes.
teach our clients. We still suffered while trying to grieve and also keep our business growing.
Now that's real talk. That's real right there. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do about it? And I want to give myself some credit, but to be honest, Margot, it wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
It was God. He just placed it up on me. I woke up in the morning and he gave me the foundation of how to help myself through what I was doing with mothers already and
Mm-hmm.
their children. And he was like, that's the same framework. It looks a little different. It sounds a little different. The audience is a little different. But the framework that I gave you before, you need to do that to propel your business.
Yes. Oh my. Mm-mm-mm.
And so I got to work and I wrote it down and I made that vision clear and plain.
Yes. Yes.
and and that's how it happened. It wasn't cute. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't well thought out. It wasn't one of those things that you say, oh, I'm going to be this when I grow up. That wasn't my story.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Mm.
literally life and living it. And
Wow.
then knowing that I can help others that are probably hiding behind that, whose businesses are stagnant. They may continue to make money, but they know that they can be given more. They know
Hmm.
that they could be doing more. But nobody taught us grief
No. Mm-mm.
in our personal life, right?
No.
And they definitely ain't teach it as an entrepreneur.
Mm-mm. Nowhere.
You hear?
Uh-huh.
So
Wow.
yeah, so that's how I got into this space, was realizing that I was stuck.
Hmm.
I was neglecting clients because I didn't know how to handle all of the moving parts at one time.
Well, you know what, Monet, I'm listening to you, and to me, what you are offering is valuable on so many levels, because maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe a person hasn't had just direct, well, I don't know, maybe we always look for the overnight success, but maybe the person that has really grown their business and they are neglecting their family or something
Hmm.
like that, would that be a form of trauma? Because and once they start self-sabotaging and that type of thing, I've seen people do that. They're on the they're just on the road up just 50 miles an hour, and it's almost like they're putting on the brakes, and all of a sudden they can't do this and they can't do that, and they're showing up late and all kinds of things. Is that a form of being stuck and that type of thing?
It absolutely is. And I love that you brought up the example of the person that literally spent the time growing so much that they weren't at home.
Hmm.
Do you know what happened to their home while they weren't there?
I can only imagine.
Exactly. So that's a trauma in their life. Now, they may not look at it at the time when the finances are looking great, when the bank
Hmm.
account is growing.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if they haven't solidified that relationship, right, with their family members, I always ask my kids permission, and my husband at the time permission whenever I knew that what I was setting out to do was going to be time consuming.
Hmm.
We had a conversation about it. But
Hmm.
sometimes people don't do that. And so they get to this really high point, and then it happens. That it's what happens when you get somewhere and you haven't had that conversation, and there's something going on at home, and now you're stuck because now you can't show up like you used to. You thought those people was always going to support you there,
Yeah.
but you didn't even create the space.
Wow. Mm. That's amazing. And so many people are right there.
Yeah.
So many people. Oh my goodness. You are just really causing people to look at themselves right through here. You really, really are. Can we dig a little bit deeper and backtrack to the
Yes.
four spaces where the entrepreneur really gets stuck, and we really need to take a look at ourselves there, grief in those areas?
The one that I seen come up the most, and maybe it's just because it's the one that people choose to voice, is the financial grief.
Mm.
There was an investment. This literally happened to me, and it's part of my story of what I did too. Maybe there was something I could have done different, but there's an investment where you put a lot of money into something, whether it's a product launch or a mastermind
Hmm.
or a new piece of equipment that should work a certain way that doesn't pan out to work a certain way, and you maybe even stretched your budget to make it happen,
Hmm.
and you didn't get the ROI, you didn't get the return on investment.
Yeah.
And so you're continually thinking about that day in and day out, right?
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
put the money, the time, the physical, the mental energy into that particular thing. And because you're spending so much time spending on this particular thing that didn't happen, that your account should have been looking this way, the
Hmm.
financial side of it, that you can't even focus on serving the people you're supposed to serve, on creating that new product, on doing the new launch. You're spending so much time in that it literally becomes a grief. It becomes a thing that suppresses you from moving forward.
Wow.
It
That
causes you
is
to suffer.
That's true. And it will, according to how much you put into something and it didn't pan out, it will become all encompassing, because
Yes.
everything's thrown into peril at that time, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And you know what, Monaye, I'm also thinking that I've had conversations with people who want to throw it back on the coach and say, well,
Mm-hmm.
they took my money or they weren't all of this. When I'm wondering, and once again, I'm asking a question,
Mm-hmm.
is that fair for us to throw that responsibility back on the coach necessarily when perhaps we were going through some grief and we weren't really ready to invest the way we were because
Hello.
we couldn't really be all in the way we projected that we would be, when then the truth be told, we just weren't there. That happened to me. I
Yeah.
couldn't say the coach took my money. I just wasn't where that product was at the time, and it was a sizable amount of money. So I can identify with that
Yes.
one.
Listen, and it's all about, I like to remind people that sometimes you didn't show up and
Uh-huh.
sometimes they didn't show up. And what did you do to challenge them when they
Yeah.
didn't show up?
Yeah.
Because you did pay. And
Mm-hmm.
if you did nothing to challenge them, and
Mm-hmm.
instead you just are grieving it and you're talking about it and you're continuing to put that energy out into the atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
are you helping yourself?
Stuck.
Stuck,
Mm-hmm.
going nowhere fast.
Spinning your wheels.
Yes, yes,
Wow.
yes. And then there's the client and business grief.
Mm.
So this one I've heard, and it's not one that I've actually had. I lost a client that I really loved, but that person passed away. So it
Oh,
was, that
yeah.
was one portion of it. But then I've heard people that lose a client of good rapport. So like they may have been having a really great relationship with a client. It was a good paying client, or that
Mm-hmm.
client was really great with the building their business, and then they're no longer a client anymore.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And spending a lot of time in, if I still had that account, if I still had that client, if this
Mm.
person was still on my books, the if, shoulda, woulda, couldas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
spending lots of time thinking about that.
Mm.
When there's another client that's begging to work with you, they don't know and you don't know because you're not putting it out there. You're stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's something. And we don't talk about that often. We really, really, really don't talk about that. Could we also add on to the coach who has taken a client, someone who they've sojourned with for quite a while? The coach, they brought that person as far as they could, and now they step back and they just watch the person blossom and grow, knowing that I brought them as far as I could bring them at that time. Is there a form of grief attached to that
It could be in a
relationship?
sense of where that person, where some people, and I want to be sensitive the way I say this, some people feel they are owed the recognition for what they done.
Oh.
And
Mm-hmm.
maybe that client never mentioned their name.
Mm-hmm.
Now they brought them at their very early stages,
Mm-hmm.
right? They really helped them figure it out. They got them their first 10K or 100K. And now this person is millionaire and they never mentioned this person's name.
Mm-hmm.
And they're holding on to this.
Yeah.
And it's something that they keep ruminating on,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
How are you affecting your business by staying in that? And a lot of people don't consider that grief, but is it causing you distress? Is it causing you a suffering? If you are ruminating on something that did not happen, that's suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Some people take that back to their childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
My mom, father, sister, brother didn't, all of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's suffering. You're continuing to bring that into your present when that was something that happened in the past.
That is the worst thing, that the worst feeling, being stuck. And I keep hearing you say stuck, and I've been stuck also. And that is the worst feeling in the world.
It
It,
is.
it's wow. It's way up there.
It's one of those things where it's it falls in line to me with worry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like when you just continue to worry about something you can't do anything about it. And being stuck is the same thing. It's like I literally cannot move.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I cannot propel my business, or I can only do so much because I'm not opening myself up. Like in that relationship we just were talking about, the business relationship of, well, I don't want to. There's the thought that they probably don't even realize they're having. I will never build someone else up that well again because they may not mention my name.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
They may not ever say that out loud,
Mm-hmm.
but it's there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, entrepreneurs, just like anyone, they have the death-related grief, and it literally could be more than just loss of your loved one. It could be more than just a family member. It could be more than just a pet. It could also be someone like a role model. I know recently with the Kobe Bryant thing, how it affected so many people.
Yes, 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 indeed. Mm. Yeah.
So sometimes we don't realize that we can get stuck there too in the death-related grief. And especially if it happens in more than one person over like really close timing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the world says, get over it, or you should be over it by now. And all of those things that doesn't offer to help the person that's actually grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you're an entrepreneur, so you have a business to run. People expect you to show up.
Yes. Yes. And be effective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Especially if they pay you money.
Well, yeah. Yes,
even your free
indeed.
clients will do it. For those that do some free work out there, like even if you're giving and you're volunteer, like if you're volunteering time, like you're still expected to show up even while you're going through that death related grief. And we're not taught to actually process that grief, actually go through the process of understanding this is what's happening. Let me feel this. Let me realize that I'm not going to live. Let me see how much time I'm going to spend on this, and actually really do spend the time on it. That's what I teach, like spending the time on it, and then also still getting stuff done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's powerful. That's powerful. That is a how-to that you just gave us, a how-to.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about it is that spending time with grief, you really do need somebody that knows what they're doing to show you how to do that. And that's exactly what you do. You don't let you show people how to spend time with that grief, but then not let it just you won't just let them stay there.
No.
I think that's just stellar.
No. Because my plan is for you to reach whatever that goal is. Mm-hmm. My plan is to help you get there. Because you haven't been doing it, right? Mm-hmm. Or you wouldn't have even been looking on the internet or asking someone, or even if you heard it in this podcast, like it hit you because you know that you are stuck, and you've been stuck for whatever amount of time, whether it's 1 month, 2 days, and you can feel it's sinking, or if you've been stuck and you've been making the same $30,000 every month, and you know that you can make $100,000 a month. Mm-hmm. And you're like, why can't I get there? But there's some grief and there's some things happening that you've not explored.
Wow. That's period, point blank. That is right in your face right there.
It's right there. And the last one is the personal grief. And this one hit me so much during this whole phase of like growing through this grief, doing a post-traumatic growth. It's the self-identity, like when people start to change. And people find this very interesting when I talk about self-identity, because it's not that you're a different person, but something happened in your life that you changed. Mm-hmm. I moved across the country, and I'm a different person here. And I didn't know how to be that person at first. I wanted to be where all my people were, even though I chose to come. How do I operate without my mom by my side? How do I operate without my brothers in the same city? How do I operate without my cousins and my family members to, like, literally, we're going to meet up? And like, how do you do that? Yeah. So that was a self-identity thing for me. Like, who am I in this new space? How do I still show up as a person that when I did leisure time, it included family? Well, I don't have any family here. What do you do? And so I sat there and I moped and I got stuck again. Like, it's crazy because but I had the tools, Margot. So the thing was, I went right back to my program and I put myself through it. I put myself through the program.
work with the tools. If
Yeah.
you work with the tools, no matter what comes up, then you
Yes.
can keep moving. That's what I hear you
Yes.
saying.
Yes. There's in the personal grief space, there's like divorce. I talked about that. There's friendships that may no longer last. And this happens so much. It could even be like weight loss. You look
Mm-hmm.
different, your body's different. It could be you got a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
I find that to be a huge one for people that were diagnosed with a medical thing,
Mm-hmm.
or their children was diagnosed with a medical thing. And so they're taking a step back from their business, although they don't necessarily want to, but they don't really have the tools to like, how do I still show up for my child and do this business? Or did I create a plan that my business can still run now that I have this happening in life?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And so
huge.
now they're in their brain, they're struggling with, yes, I should be helping my kid, or I should be doing my health, but I also want to, and anytime you put a but in a sentence, you just canceled out the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So how do you do all of those things? How do you still run your business successfully? How do you still grow it? How do you still be the best you want it to be as an entrepreneur, even though something is literally causing you distress?
Mm-hmm.
Literally, you're suffering.
Wow.
And I want to mention this before I forget about it. I recently had, I like to call my group of young ladies I hang out here with, my aunties, and we were talking about this grief in business, and they were saying that something that's been really interesting and hard for them and challenging is that they're losing a lot of their friends.
Oh, yes.
And it's
Yes.
not because of the person is no longer a friend, but they're passing away.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
attending a lot of funerals and, them still having that survivor side of it.
Mm-hmm. That's huge. And yeah, I know of, my mom went through that in family and friends, and I saw it change her. It really did. It changed
Yeah,
her. Hmm. Wow. Monaye, I don't, this is such a huge subject, and you have given us how to's. And I want to just kind of backtrack and make sure that everybody understands that it's okay to go and get therapy. That's where it all starts with this thing of grief. Is that correct?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Especially when you're non functioning.
Mm-hmm.
If you're at a point where you're not functioning, you're unable to help yourself, other people are unable to help you, even just a little bit. I am a huge, huge, huge believer. I've seen therapists, I do it for my family.
Mm-hmm.
Please go there first, because there is something, the gift that they're given, that's
Mm-hmm.
different from this one. They're going to talk about some things that maybe you haven't even thought of from your past and bring you to the present and ensure that you're actually walking this out. What I come in and do is I take you from like, you're here, but you want to go here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just
Mm-hmm.
work on your goals. Let's get you where you want to be.
Wow. That's
And
huge.
let's do it in a way that you can take the things that I teach you and use it in every area of your life. One of my mission statements is that you never have to talk to me again in a
Wow.
way that you need my help. We can still be, acquaintances, but you don't need my help because I've given you the tools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've
Wow.
showed you how to use them for yourself. And that's literally what I've been doing, even in my life in different areas. Like I said, I went through a new thing when I moved, and it was like all of a sudden there's this new area that I had to navigate. And I went back to the same thing that I created to help others. And it's like, okay, let's
Mm-hmm.
go through this.
Mm-hmm. So the tool that you used to work through, on the other side of the therapy after the children's father was murdered, that same tool worked after you moved across country. It was just different situations, but the same tool.
Same thing, the absolute same thing. The same thing I teach mothers, because that's another area I work with. I empower mothers to help their grieving children or their
Mm-hmm.
trauma survivors. So that same thing that was created there, that I used to help my daughter come from a very scary state
Mm-hmm.
into actually having clients in her business, and she's 15.
Oh my goodness.
Hello.
Yeah.
Where she
Wow.
didn't think she even wanted to do any of that stuff anymore. She was
Mm-hmm.
done with it a couple
Mm-hmm.
years ago. She was like, I don't want to do any of this stuff. But the
Mm-hmm.
same tool, then on the entrepreneur side, just a couple tweaks because it looks a little different, but it's the exact same thing. And it's called From Grace to Freedom.
From grace to
From
freedom.
grace to freedom. It's
Mm-hmm.
literally allowing ourselves to have grace with ourselves. And coming on the other side of that, there's a couple other things in the middle to get to the side of freedom. And that freedom is where you literally propel your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm. I love that. From grace to freedom. That's what
Yes.
you're offering, Hope. You are the director of Hope, the Hope
Yes.
Dealer, and you are teaching people from grace to freedom. Wow.
Yes.
How do people get in contact with you?
Yeah. So I am a person that like to be open to all forms of communication. They can go on my website at www.coachmonaye.com.
Mm-hmm.
I can be emailed at hello@coachmonaye.com. But then I'm a huge fan of texting. It's such a weird thing. A lot of people don't do it, or I don't know, they think it's kind of weird that I give out my number, but I that's how I connect with people. Sometimes people just need hope. And like you said, I'm the director of hope and I like to give hope. And sometimes it's just a response in that moment that help people.
Yes,
So
yes.
I'm open to that, to just responding to people in that moment. And people can text me at 636-393-8833.
You want to give that one more time, please? 636.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
636-393-8833.
Wow. I love that. Director of Hope.
Direct of Hope.
And you even go into major corporations and try to help them reimagine, to understand this thing of grief and the employees, and you with the HR background and the managerial background, you've seen so much in corporate, I'm sure. Real quick before we close out, how do you go in? How great is the challenge to go in and help and actually make sure that corporations look at grief differently for their employees?
The biggest thing is the starting of the conversation
Mhm.
because most organizations offer an employee assistance program.
Yes.
And that is the thing. That's the end all to be all of something happened to you in your life. Contact the employee assistance program. But then
Hmm.
there's things that's actually happening in the workplace while they're there. They need support while they're there. The other employees, nobody's taught employees. First off, we didn't learn how to do grieving when we're a child, right? We don't
Hmm.
learn how to do it at work, of course, right? It's not the employer's job, according to them, to know that, right? How do
Hmm.
you teach your employees to have a sensitivity to someone that is grieving?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of the times, if you're close enough with your coworkers, or someone know, or
Hmm.
especially if it's something tragic. In my case, it happened more than once.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
my coworkers, I gave myself permission to be who I needed to be at work. I gave
Yes.
myself permission to cry at my desk. I
Hmm.
gave myself permission to take a time out. I gave
Hmm.
myself permission to go to a conference room. It wasn't a conversation about it. I
Hmm.
actually, at one point a while ago, was kind of, hey, why are you in here? Why are you crying? You need to get back to work type of thing.
Wow.
Because there's even the managerial portion where that sensitivity thing about grief isn't even talked about. And then to add on, and I'm going to talk really fast because this is a very important thing that's happening in real life, unfortunately, nowadays. Tons of active shooting things. There's the active shooter trainings, like what to do if somebody come in. There's the
Hmm.
insurance that they have, right?
Hmm.
Well, what are you teaching the employees that now they come back and someone else was shot at work?
Yeah.
How are you teaching them to have compassion? How are
Yeah.
you teaching them to understand how to support that person instead of walking past them with their head down
Hmm. Hmm.
or overindulging in conversation with them and not letting them work?
Hmm. Wow.
Right?
Never think about that. And
Yeah.
these days, that's very real, and people are
Yes.
they're operating from that level. Wow.
It's unfortunate. It's one of those things that in this space of where I work with trauma, it's unfortunate that these are things that we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, they are things we have to deal with. And we can't just sweep under the rug and try to send people to individual EAP sessions. That group thing that needs to happen in the organizations becomes more
Mm-hmm.
important now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because we're all affected. Something like that happens, we are all affected.
Yes.
Actually, and I just have one final question. Tell me if I'm wrong. When something happens in the workplace, and say someone, a coworker, a coworker has a massive heart attack, and we don't see them again ever, that affects the whole unit, the whole
Yes.
organization, and nobody wants to talk about that. They have the picture up and may have a lunch or something like that. But I remember that happening when I worked at a major corporation, and it made me think about things for months. And,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
some people weren't able to take that person's picture down. It was just, it almost got creepy after a
Mm-hmm.
while. But that's how people were dealing with it. And you didn't really know how to feel about it. But nobody really, kind of had a memorial type of thing, but nobody really said anything. And that was kind of a wow. I just
Right.
thought of that.
Let's just separate work with this person's death, even though it was something that was so real
Mm-hmm.
in the organization, that was so real. It happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we as organizations, how do we decide that we're going to actually create a space to help our, now everybody's going to take it different. I'm not saying that everyone's going to actively want to participate or whatever that looks like, but what it is you're offering it, and when they need it,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
offered. They can go there.
Mm-hmm.
They can have the seminar to look back at in your arsenal of learning and
Mm-hmm.
development.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Very important conversation that we're having here today. And as you're right, we are born to die. We are just passing through here one way or another, as some believe, some do not. Bottom line is that our dogs, our cats, our mothers, our fathers, even our children are destined to leave here. And we all are going to understand grief. As entrepreneurs, the financial, the loss of
Yes.
a client, the four categories that you gave us, we are all going to experience that as entrepreneurs and as employees. So I really thank you for, gosh, I thank you for being bold enough and sensitive enough to understand that you are the one who can help people get from A to Z. And be all right, get themselves unstuck, give them the from grace to freedom
Yes.
tool, and live their lives, and be the entrepreneurs that they were supposed to be. So I thank you, dear lady. I thank you. You renew my hope in this thing of how people can resolve grief, which is
Yes.
very personal.
It is very personal. And it going unresolved actually creates a long-term result that no one wants. And there's tons of research about that. So I
Hmm.
thank you so much for even having me and allowing me to bring a heavy topic,
Yeah.
to a very important topic
Hmm.
to the world.
Well, we need to hear more of it. I am definitely going to push this episode because you made mention when you gave the four categories for entrepreneurs, you spoke of one, the financial, that everyone speaks of, but I want to make sure that nobody's hiding, or at least understands, as you say, give yourself permission to see where you're at,
Hmm.
and get in contact with Monaye, and get yourself unstuck. Get the tools, get the help. Start with a therapist if you need to. Hey, I saw a therapist before I left corporate. No, no shame to game. I think that by
No
now the,
shame.
the world knows I had to, because it got real bad on me,
Hmm.
And so let Monaye take you from to build your life after the therapy. Do what you need to do, but give yourself permission to address these issues in these places so that you can be as bold and as bright and as Simon Bailey says, as brilliant as you are supposed to be. So again, I thank you, dear lady. Thank you. Thank you. God bless you for the work that you do, and sharing yourself with the audience today. So I always tell everybody you're going to have to listen more than one time, because right out the gate, Monaye gave us gems, and you just had to start taking notes. But versus just taking notes, I think for this subject you need to take action, and the call to action is identify where you are at, and if you are in a phase of grief, then reach out to Monaye. That is the call to action here. And if you identify a loved one or a coworker there, once again, the call to action is to reach out to Monaye Marcia, MSA. Okay?
Sounds
So,
great.
all right, all right. Well, I'm Margot Levette. Man, I have to close out another great episode. Oh, it's just getting better and better and better, because people are stepping into their greatness and they're coming on to the show. And for that, I say a million thanks. So I will be back next week with a brand new episode here on Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation. In the meantime, take care. Bye-bye now. I want to thank you for listening to Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation. Couple of things that I want you to do right now: go to my website, pick up a copy of Her Business, Her Voice, Her Reinvention: How I Went from Game Show Hopping to International Show Host, Author, and Speaker in 1 year. Number 2, please freely listen to each and every episode. Share them out with your family, friends, the men in your lives. And then number 3, get in contact with me, one of the experts that have been on the show, because I want to make sure that you reinvent yourself. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode here on Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation.